Then there are two other issues that are also incorrectly written in the history books in the past. One is the so-called supplementary clause on the issue of third country power. That's what the diplomatic history says, and Mao Zedong himself said so. What is this additional clause? On February 6, 1950, the nationalist planes bombed Shanghai and all the power plants were blown up. The whole Shanghai was in darkness, the market and the stock market were in chaos and prices were soaring. Chen Yi sent a telegram to Mao Zedong, saying that he could not let the KMT planes go wild like that. At that time, although the mainland was occupied by the communists, the skies were still owned by the Kuomintang, and their planes could fly over the mainland as far as Sichuan, scattering leaflets and dropping spies whenever they wanted. At that time, the Chinese Communist Party had 32 planes, 20 of which were reconnaissance planes, communication planes, and trainers. They only controlled Beijing, but not the rest of the country, and let the KMT planes run rampant, and had no anti-aircraft guns. Then the Soviet Union, which he wanted, immediately offered assistance, and this time Mao raised the issue. The Soviet Union also raised the issue of the so-called supplementary provisions. What did the supplementary provisions mainly refer to? It means that in the northeast of China and Xinjiang, no third country forces should enter. On this issue, I now see from the documentary record, from the archives and conversation records, etc., Mao Zedong did not raise objections. Expressing agreement, only Zhou Enlai asked if there were North Koreans counted. Because there were especially many North Koreans in the northeast. The Soviet side said the North Koreans were fine, we mainly meant the Americans. American forces would not be able to go, and in addition, get rid of the Japanese quickly. The two sides did not quarrel on this issue. Later I interviewed Deng Liqin, who went to Moscow with Liu Shaoqi during the liberation of Xinjiang, and then in July he flew directly to Ili to plan the Xinjiang uprising, and then he stayed there. I asked him about this. I said, what is the attitude of the Chinese Communist Party in expelling the third country forces? He said, welcome, it's great. At that time, there were many Indians and Pakistanis coming to Xinjiang to do business, and they took advantage of this to expel all of them. This is one reason. The second reason is that Mao Zedong repeatedly talked about the four colonial cooperatives. 2 colonies refers to the northeast and Xinjiang, for cooperatives refers to the 4 joint stock companies. Mao Zedong said that this was imposed on us by the Soviet Union, which is also completely false. This is what you, China, begged for, so how come they imposed it on you? Now all the files are there. What happened? First Wang Zhen telegraphed to Peng Dehuai, who telegraphed to Liu Shaoqi, who in turn telegraphed to Mao Zedong. The production of non-ferrous metals and oil in Xinjiang was originally a joint venture between China and the Soviet Union, but now, because the Soviet factories have been withdrawn, the production cannot be done, so can we have a joint stock company? Peng Dehuai thought it was a good idea to make use of the Soviet Union's funds. Of course, at that time the concept of people and now is not the same, then feel as if the concession of resources is a little suspicion of treason. But Liu Shaoqi heard this after he thought it was very good. He sent a telegram to Mao Zedong, suggesting that not only in Xinjiang can do so, the mainland can also do so, please talk to your Soviet comrades. So Mao Zedong asked Zhou Enlai to talk to the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union said, let's do these 4 companies first. The specific contract was signed on March 27, and the Dalian shipyard was a little later. Why did Mao say later that it was imposed on him and he had no choice but to accept it for the greater good? Because after the announcement of the Sino-Soviet alliance treaty, the 4 joint stock companies were reported in the British newspapers, and the Chinese people at that time, as I mentioned earlier, thought that you were selling your resources, not to mention this, and would not even be willing to take out a loan. Mao Zedong went back when others said that Stalin was particularly stingy, only gave China a loan of $300 million. Not Stalin did not give, is Mao Zedong do not want. At that time, someone asked, telegraphed that the loan cannot be more. Mao Zedong telegraphed back and asked why more loans. If you take out so many loans, you will have to pay them back. At that time, the Chinese Communist Party and society as a whole did not have a modern awareness of economic development, so what joint ventures, what loans, all think it is a bit of a sellout. I read a material is that at that time, after the news of the signing of the Sino-Soviet alliance treaty was announced, some members of the Communist Youth League wrote to the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, saying, "You betrayed the interests of China, I declare to quit the Communist Youth League," this kind of reaction a lot. Later on, Liu Shaoqi also specifically ordered an explanation to be made quickly, especially for the joint stock companies. So in view of this reaction, I think Mao Zedong thought it would be impossible to explain to the people if he honestly declared that the joint stock company was our initiative, so he covered up this matter.